I would love if you would all join me in bringing up to the Zoom stage somebody who has changed the way we understand business. Originally, through the best selling book, The Experience Economy. I preferred the cassette tapes, obviously. And Joe, you have done something that I think is a mark of a teacher that really makes a difference, which is you have helped us to understand at a macro level, at a historical level, something really important about business today. And I'm super pumped to go into this exploration. Where I want to start is there's a core framework. And whether someone has read the book, The Transformation Economy, or they've followed you on Substack, they may have come across this framework. It is in the workbook here. Help us to understand this idea that there's a pressure for our offerings to be commoditized, and we ultimately ought to consider what it means to move this direction with our offerings. Any place you want to kind of come into this, would it help us to understand this kind of core entry point?
Yeah, so this progression of economic value, the correct name, really describes what's been going on macroeconomically in the world for millennia, where we've gone from an agrarian economy based off commodities to an industrial economy based off goods to a service economy. And then around the turn of the century, maybe later, we shifted into an experience economy where experiences became the predominant economic offering, right? That's what people want. And that's why goods and services became commoditized, or at least one of the big reasons. They became commoditized because people wanted to buy them at the lowest possible price, the greatest possible convenience, so they could spend their hard-earned money and their hard-earned time on the experiences that they value. And the antidote to commoditization, commoditization is like the law of gravity. It brings you down year after year. Customization lifts you up, right? So that's why it's there. It's actually how I discovered this progression of economic value from my first book, Mass Customization, where I recognized that mass customizing a good turns into a service. What does it turn a service into? If you design a service that's so appropriate for this particular person, exactly what they need, then you can't help but make them go, wow, and turn it into an experience. So that's when I recognized that experiences were, in fact, a distinct economic offering, and that we would eventually have an economy based off experiences. And that's exactly what's happened. And then from the very beginning, though, I recognize that experiences can be commoditized as well. You can look at sort of theme restaurants, I think, as the first industry that self-commoditized, where you go once, you've been there, done that, you don't have to go again. A colleague and I wrote an article back in 2024, June of 2024, not quite 2 years ago, where he talked about how Starbucks is commoditizing itself in the Harvard Business Review. And I'm sure it was a total coincidence, but 3 weeks later, they fired the CEO, and the new one, Brian Nichols, is doing much of what we talked about that they should do in that article. It's something that experienced stagers need to recognize. And so given that, what happens when you customize an experience? When you design an experience that's so appropriate for a particular person, then you can't help but turn to what we often call a life-changing experience, an experience that changes us in some way. And that's what a transformation is. Again, a distinct economic offering, as distinct from experiences. Experiences are from services and so forth. But where you're using experiences now as the raw material to guide people to change, to help them achieve their aspiration, to become who they want to become. That's what transformations are.
I want to share, Joe, what came up for me when I was reading the book, because I just got a copy of it, a month or two ago, whenever. And I'm looking at this framework and I'm thinking, where have I seen this to be true? And how do I relate to this? And then I'd love your kind of perspective on the example I came up with.
Mm-hmm.
And I, of course, as a teacher of a method that, I don't know, 200 people here utilize, I'm thinking about what we do at Exchange. And as consultants, as change agents, coaches, experts, whatever labels we use, the most obvious example to me, and I think a lot of us have been confronted by this, is for 25 years, we could really put our flag in the ground around our expertise. Like Bill Gates wrote that article, Content is King, in
Right.
1996. And he was right for a long time. Because when you couldn't get ideas the way you can today, it could feel transformational to get an idea that was a big deal. But so to me, this is a big example where it was, for me, I would have thought of ideas and content as transformational, but it's been commoditized. Whether we agree or disagree with all of this, it's inarguable that, like, okay, the information, there's a perception that I can get the info I need when I want, where I want, instantly. And I think it's actually a healthy confrontation, because as a change agent who wants to help others, did they really ever want to learn for the sake of learning? Or did they want it because they wanted something to be different? I feel like we're just being forced to get even more clear on the real value that we should be there to create. Is that example a legitimate example of this in action, or do you see it any differently, or any thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. It's exactly what's going on. That, I'm in the ideas business as well. I'm a content creator. I like to publish mine in books and articles and so forth. But then they become available everywhere, right, in today's environment, and they're being scraped by AI, which can then spit it out in combination with other things today. And fundamentally, it's not what the great majority of people want. There are some professional learners, that I thought I could be a professional student, right, and just go from bachelor's to master's to PhD to hang on and that. And there are some people like that just love learning. And so I've got so many books here as well. But the application of that learning, the reason why you do that learning, is what's important, right? What an aspiration is the desire that somebody has to change in some way, and everything else is a means, right? So it's a means to an end, and that's what the case with books, with papers, with articles, with ideas, whether you're presenting them live on stage in a book or whatever, that they are means to an end. And the true end is that aspiration that people want. And as I always say, if you provide the end rather than merely the means, then you'll gain much more economic value, right? You'll create more value within your customers by helping them achieve their aspiration, which then helps you create that economic value for you and your business.
Yeah, but by the end of this conversation, and I'm saying this so everybody keeps me accountable to this, I'm going to ask you, and I want us to talk about charging for transformation.
Yep.
One of the things our students have heard us talk a lot about is, you want to charge more money, make more money, you got to solve a bigger problem. And I actually think your frameworks are a beautiful way for us to confront ourselves on what problem are we really solving? How many of you are down to talk about charging for transformation by show? Okay. All right. Unmute and say, Joe, show me the money, right? Go ahead, everybody.
Show me the money.
Oh,
Show me the money.
we'll get there. We'll get there.
Well, and interestingly, John, is I put that in both the first chapter and the last chapter. Right. So like you feel compelled to bring it up now, which I did. I said, I got to talk about this now because it's so much a part of what makes you a distinct economic offering is what you charge for. But then the details of how to go about it and everything I put at the end when you finally figure out that, okay, this is what I want to do. This is the offering I want to create. Well, then now you really got to get that business model down, which is how you charge for it. So I find that interesting. You too want to bring it up at the beginning and then at the end.
Well, yeah, and it's okay. It's okay for us to acknowledge that we've got to capture value, right, as we're creating it.
Right. So let me briefly say what that is, right,
Yeah,
and then we'll come back to it at the end.
Yeah, please.
All right. If you bring up the progression of economic value again, is to recognize that you are what you charge for, right? You are what you charge for. So if you're charged for undifferentiated stuff, you're in the commodities business. If you charge for tangible things, you're in the goods business. If you charge for the activity your people perform, you're in the services business. And that means time and material sort of thing, right? We charge by the hour or by the day, right? That's it. And then experiences is charging for time, charging for the time your customers spend with you, because that's what they value. And transformations, finally, what do they value? They value being transformed. They value the outcome of what you do. With transformations, inputs don't matter, only outcomes. And so that's what you need to charge for, the demonstrated outcomes that your customers achieve. Doesn't have to be the whole of your charge. You can charge at all these different levels. There are companies that do charge at all 5 levels. But that's what you need to think about, is you need to get that level. You need to align what you charge for with what your customers actually value, right? Again, that's the outcome. And then we can talk about how to do that at the end.
Yeah. And I find it so interesting in our work. We get invited to facilitate a leadership meeting or an association conference. And we might get invited in because they're having one conversation about making it a better meeting. I don't have that conversation. I quickly ask them, what's the story of your organization? Who are you at your best? Who do you want to be? I shift it to a very different conversation. It's fascinating because I'll be doing the same thing, but I can price a lot higher just by framing everything differently, which actually, this is a lead in to, I want to ask you about one word on the cover of your book. I want to ask you about one word, because I think what you've done...
Is it the word "the"?
Actually, I could let you guess, but I just want to say this framework I think is very timely. How many of you can feel the timeliness of this as a change agent? It feels very timely. When I look at your book, and I know there's meaning to everything here, there's one word that is actually the one that I stick with the most. Can you guess what it is? Because I'm going to ask you all about it.
I can guess.
What word do you think it is?
Aspirations.
That's it. Like, if I had to remember,
it's either that or guiding. I had to,
if I had to remember what's the entire purpose of Joe's teachings, and I want to remember more than this, but just in case, I got 5 kids, I'm going to forget a lot. Aspirations. And I want to give you a shout out because chapter 2 and 3 of the book, chapter 2, before you get into how to do this, you have a whole chapter that says the whole purpose of business is elevating humanity. It's human flourishing. And I just want everyone who doesn't know you, Joe, to know that before you got into the nitty gritty of how we're going to do it, it's like, it is about elevating all that is good, right? You have a whole chapter on flourishing, which really to me is a setup to aspirations. It's a fascinating word. Tell us what we should understand about aspirations, and how is that different than business goals? How's that different than KPIs? What does aspirations mean?
Yeah, so we have a lot of goals, aims, KPIs, all these sorts of things. The core thing to recognize about an aspiration is that all transformation is identity change. Right, so it's a change in identity, not just a goal that we want to meet, which can become aspirational, but it's a change in identity that you can say, if it's a big change, you can say, I was X, now I am Y, right? I've got a math background, so I use variables like that, right? I was X, now I am Y. And that X and Y define the sort of from to, and that's why I tell companies to do is that figure out, you may need a generic from to, how you help people transform from X to Y, from flabby to fit, from sick to well, from smoker to non-smoker, from on and on the list could go. But each one has an individual version of that, what their own personal aspiration is within that. They may phrase it very differently. It's also important to understand with that aspiration is that customers often are not quite sure what that is, or know that they have one, or know how to articulate it. So one of the first jobs is to help uncover what those aspirations are, because like you say, they say something else, but you think that it means this, right? And that's often the case. So uncovering the sort of aspirations that they have to help them be better off, to help them flourish. One of the things I found in research in the book, when I first started to talk about transformations, decades ago, I sort of view as like this little, the bluebird of happiness, the lights on your shoulder and whispers in your ear, hey, you should think about doing this or being this. And it turns out that a lot of transformation actually comes out of trauma, where something horrible happens in somebody's lives, right? They lose a loved one, they get cancer, they get divorced, as somebody mentioned earlier. All those sorts of traumatic things. The interesting thing is, with them, immediately your identity has changed. Right? I have cancer I didn't have cancer, now I have cancer. I am a patient with cancer, right? And And so you know, on some scale, you've gone down because trauma means you're going down in some level of flourishing. And the job then is to bring them back over whole, up to whole, right? They'll never be the same person, right? It's always it's a metamorphosis where you can never go back. You can't be who you were before that trauma, but you can be a whole person. You can flourish again as a result of that, and that's often what the transformation needs. In other cases, it's pure aspiration, and there are levels of aspirations that are less, I'll say, than metamorphosis. Right? Metamorphosis means you have a large scale change in identity, a new identity. You've left some things behind. It's significant. It relates to core identity of who you are. But there are other cases where it's a much lesser thing, such as you want to enrich some level of identity that you already have. You want to become more of something. You want to become a better golfer. You want to become a better painter, you know, whatever it might be. In businesses, you want to have a better business in some way that you define it. Sometimes that rises to even higher level of a true ambition. And here the word goal is probably appropriate to be able to say, I have a goal, right, to become a single-digit handicapper, to be able to become a professional painter, and so forth. And it's retaining that identity. Although once you get to the point of going to professional, you may say, well, that switches over to a new level of identity, right? Yes, I'm still a painter, but a professional painter is distinct. And it's like same with like a writer. One of my goals, ambitions, aspirations early on when I worked at IBM was to become a professional author. I was able to eventually do that. And so I think it was then it slides over to that metamorphosis. You also have small level changes or additions of aspects of identity, such as you want to become a gardener. You never gardened. You find that interesting, at least like looking at gardens. So you start reading books about it. You start going to classes. You start buying plants. You know, you will look at YouTube videos and so forth. And you become a gardener. It's a new element of identity, but it's not a core thing. It's something, you know, you could, in fact, leave behind and it wouldn't change who you are at your core.
There is so much that you're saying that I want to ask about, we can talk about. I want to just bring examples forward. One thing I want to just appreciate, Joe, as I was reading your book, there were certain ideas that hit me that I thought, I understand this, and this, I can immediately see this. And there were other concepts that I realized I need to go back and reread this about 15 times because you have so much nuance around just like categories of aspiration, slices of transformation. It's right. So I encourage everybody, if you're picking up on how much distinction Joe has around on all this, if you haven't seen the book, it's real. There's a few things you said I want to respond to. One is, in my experience, whether I'm helping a large association to facilitate their conference, or I've got next week 20 senior leaders for a 3-day executive offsite, in both cases, it's more common than not. They are not aligned when I ask them about different aspects of their identity. So one of the nuggets that you drop that I just want to say, here's what I've seen. As soon as they realize that part of what I'm going to help with is them getting clarity, connection to, and maybe even alignment around parts of their identity, they salivate. Because like, I have so many examples. We had a company come to us last year, and they came to us, can you run a workshop on how to work well together? And of course, I said, well, why? What's the situation? What do you
exact right question?
Yeah.
Why?
Why?
Always
What's your deal?
ask why.
Yeah. Why? Why do you think you need that? Well, it's our 40-year anniversary. We just had a major liquidity event. We're trying to position for the next 40 years. I said, you got 200 leaders in the room. Have you had a chance yet as an organization to capture who you've been at your best that you want to preserve? That's an identity conversation. Have you had a chance to ask, what future do we want to be celebrating? In a sense, that's a part of their identity, right? A shared vision is a part of an identity. And then finally, who will you need to be in order to live into that? These are all identity conversations. By the end of the conversation, they're hiring us for, I think it was $74,000, $75,000. If I was running a workshop, I'd have to take off as 0.
Yeah.
If I'm helping a company to articulate and capture in half a day who they are at their best and who they need to be,
Yes.
I can add a 0 to that. We have a company right now. We're doing change work, and they're 80 years old. And in our prep meetings, I'm proactively staying away from what are going to be the nuts and bolts of the big summit we're leading, and I'm inviting them to consider, what does it mean to become 80 years old? You know, those are the crown years. It's about spiritual wisdom. Like, that's the conversation. How can you embody that? The CEO is salivating at that identity conversation. So I just wanted to plus one. Number one, they need help uncovering that. And number two, it's valued much higher in my experience.
Yep, exactly. And now I have so much to respond to on what you're talking about.
Well, please.
So one is to recognize I all my examples thus far I talked about are personal examples, individuals, right? That
ours are often
look at
collective,
the varieties of aspirants out there. You have individuals, you have individual consumers, you have employees, and organizations, right, together as a collective that you're talking about. You have a business, which is separate, which again is sort of an individual thing, but it has an identity all its own. The organization has an identity, and there are communities, right, non-business sort of groups of people. And it's always tougher when you look at you having multiple people and how do you transform as that. And then secondly, it's the asking why, right? Asking why is so important to get at aspirations. I love the old manufacturing technique of asking 5 whys. You know, when something goes wrong, you don't just try and fix that, because whatever happened is a symptom of something that happened earlier in the chain. Yeah. So you ask why that happened, and that may still be a symptom. So you ask why again, You know, 5 is a generic number, but however long it takes to get down to that core 1. And if you want to truly be in the transformation business, it is to get to that core. What is the core aspiration to which what they're asking you to do is but the means, right? The end to which that is the means. And you can even look at that sequence, right? Of you asking why 5 times, you get 5 different answers, but there's a sequence that allows you to go a path through and a deepening of that. And there's many companies I talk to, like even goods manufacturers. You may not be able to get to that core aspiration, but you may be able to get 1 or 2 levels down the sequence, of which the physical good can actually make a difference in helping that. So it's not a transformation, but it is transformational, and thinking about how, going through that.
It took me 6 weeks to realize that everything you're saying is hidden in the image on the cover of your book. Like, oh, I helped them to go from being the bird to the plane.
Right.
Which the bigger deal there is the identity shift.
Right. And in the middle, I now call that, you know, it took me a while to figure this out. In the middle there is the like hummingbird, it's an origami. If you look up a hummingbird, that's sort of what you get there. My wife did figure out how to create that, and there's little differences in that, but yeah, look at that. So what that is a chrysalis, right? Chrysalis is a liminal space in time between what you were and what you're going to become. And as a transformation agent, as a guider of transformations, a coach, it's how do you create that chrysalis? And the workshop, your 3-day workshop that you're talking about, it's a chrysalis. They will not be the same when they leave that workshop as they were before. And the only thing I'll mention there also is that it's a very high fiduciary responsibility you have. Right, you have a moral responsibility if you control that chrysalis of what comes out the other end, and no matter how much you're being paid, you have to do what's right for the aspirant, right, or collection of aspirants that you have there to ensure that they get out of it what they're looking for.
My low sleep score the last 3 nights is one reflection of how much I'm taking on the responsibility. Yeah, Joe, I want to ask about the mechanics of creating transformation. You have there's something you talk about, which is there's a shift from there's both a relationship between experiences and transformation, and there's also some distinctions. What's the key to shifting from experience to transformation, or anything we should understand about the relationship between experiences and transformation?
Yeah, so transformations again are built atop experiences. We only ever change through the experiences that we have, Or as the old saying goes, we're all the product of our experiences. But generally, it's not one life-changing experience, although that does happen. Often, more often, it's a series of experiences, right? Again, that take you from where you are today to what you want to become. And it's generally not monotonically increasing, where you're just continually going up and to the right. There's regress as well as progress. So you've got to be able to sense and respond to what's going on. But you're designing not one experience, but a set of experiences. And while those experiences are always memorable, with transformations, they have to go beyond that. They have to become individual. They happen, experiences happen inside of us as a reaction, but transformation is where you change us from the inside out. Although I'll often say this terminology, right? You're not actually transforming the aspirant. They are transforming themselves, and you're creating the conditions under which that can happen. So it's what are those set of experiences? How do you make them not just memorable, but make them transformative experiences? And with the outcome of, not the right word, the result of an experience is the memory, right? The hallmark of experience is the memory that lives on, although it tends to dissipate over time. With transformations, the key is you've got to make it last. You've got to keep that transformation level that you would change, that aspiration. You got to make sure they do it. If I go through a smoking cessation program and quit smoking, but 6 weeks later I light up again, I wasn't truly transformed. So you have to work with them on an ongoing basis, continue to make sure that you sustain that transformation, that it lasts through time, right? Experiences are revealed over duration of time. Experiences last over time. One of the ways to think about it is commodities, goods, services provide time well saved, right? Save my time so I can spend that time on experiences that I value, which provide time well spent, and transformations provide time well invested, that you're investing in each of these experiences to yield that end outcome through those transformations, and then get that to sustain through time. And then the other key thing, if you already stage experiences, and if you provide workshops and you think of those as experiences that you stage, which is a lot better than thinking of them as services you deliver, right? Because they're spending time with you. You're designing the time that they spend with you intentionally, being intentional. Everything that's what you have to do to create a great experience. There's one model in chapter 4 of the book that is like the one thing you need to do. If you do nothing else, if you read nothing else, it's this model exactly, encapsulation, right? I call that encapsulation, but all these things have been around for a very long time. If there's so many coaches here in this call, it's often things that you do naturally. If you learn to be a good coach, you're going to do this naturally. And I'm just providing words to it. It's things that's very academically researched about how well this stuff works, which is basically take that experience and encapsulate it with preparation beforehand, reflection afterward, and then integration on an ongoing basis. So the preparation is, look at this experience right here, John.
Yep.
Right before we came on, right, we had the preparation of getting the right attitude of people to prepare them to open up their minds to everything we're going to talk about, and then you had them, think of what change that they wanted to work on in the world, and get an object that reinforces that change. I was very pleased, by the way, the two of the people on the call, Sherry Fitz and Niels Gott, came to our Ascend event to launch the book in Minneapolis on February 3rd. And they both chose something that I gave them, which is a challenge coin. So we gave everybody that came there and people I've interacted with significantly on transformations. And so, John, if we ever meet live, right, I will bring you one of these challenge coins.
Love it.
It's like a military challenge coins. If you accept it, it means that every time we get together, if you don't have your coin, you're buying.
Nice.
But and inside of this coin, and Kevin Doley, who's on the call here, designed this with me. It has all the key models that we're talking about here, and with the transformation economy on top, and then the key of fostering human flourishing. I don't know if you can see that, right? Fostering human flourishing on the other side, right? And there's the chrysalis bird that you pointed out. That's the chrysalis within the spheres of human flourishing that are there, right? So we prepared them. You guys prepared them for this event. Then you have the experience, and then you reflect on it. And I'm betting at the end of this event, you've got some reflection going on.
There's a good chance.
Where you think about the event. You think of what were the highlights of this experience, whatever it might be. What are the things that really felt important to me as I was there, that impacted me? Are there, and here, like in a diagnosis experience, are there now things I might want to change in my life? Or given the transformation journey I'm on, how does this help me do that? Or given I came into it like a workshop with a core aspiration, now you reflect on, has this done the job of taking you from where you were at the beginning to what you aspire to become, or what the corporation aspired to become over the course of that? And the thing about reflection, any experience you change, reflection automatically and retroactively increases the value of the experience. Just get people to reflect, and they'll remember it more. They will think of those highlights more. It will last longer because of that. But then the job's not done. And this is the key, again, the key difference between experiences and transformations is that you need to keep going on, and that's what integration does. You need to work with them on an ongoing basis until, at least until that transformation truly sticks. That yes, they've been transformed. They were X, now they are Y. There's no possibility of going back to X because of the integration that you've done, or very little possibility. And that often then yields into a next aspiration, allows you to go back to the beginning. You think of how many companies, John, that you've worked with, not just for one workshop, that leads into many more things because you're the one that brought them to where they are, and natural to be their guide for the next journey. I didn't point this out with the progression of economic value, but the economic function going up the middle, which is the third set of arrows, is very important too, that you extract commodities, you make goods, you deliver services, you stage, that's intentional design, experiences, you guide transformations. You create the conditions under which they transform. You're guiding them, which means you're a coach, you're a shaman, you're a wizard, you're a guru, you're a navigator, you're an advocate, whatever term it makes sense for you to be able to use, that's your economic function. That's what you're doing that creates value within each one of your customers.
And of course, you're saying that in front of, I don't know, 175 to 200 certified exchange guides. So when you and I met, whenever it was 6 months ago or so, and I saw that this word meant something for you, it's on the cover of your book, I thought, it's so interesting. Yeah. I want to give an appreciation and maybe an example or two from our world that you could react to. And let's actually use this moment in time right now. So here we are, there's 235 of us here, whatever the number is, right? Yep. So we're in this experience. Well, one of the things that we stand for at Exchange is doing everything we can so that even when we're online, we're all behaving like we're here live, right? So there's a lot of online meetings, just like this one, where
all the cameras are off.
On my screen, 200 are on.
Right.
And now anybody here could say, well, why does that make a difference to you? What if it's not about you? What if what I want for Joe is for him to see faces? You all understand there's multiple stakeholders here that everything we're doing is in service of. So here's a very simple kind of like elementary example, but the point is proven in real time. Part of how we have 80, 90% of cameras on has to do with what we communicate ahead of time.
Right.
And so that's a very simple example, but I would encourage any of you that lead experiences, if you want people to show up a certain way, whose responsibility is it to set the expectation? The culture of this experience begins with these touch points. It doesn't begin when we click on the Zoom or walk in the door. It begins when people read or hear or watch the preparation. And I'll give one other example, Joe. We've got a large conference we're leading. We got a bunch of them in several weeks for a membership organization. And there's so much at stake for the organization that part of what we recommend, or we kind of say, you're going to do this, is we're going to host a pre-event the week before. It's 90 minutes. And during that pre-event, we're facilitating a series of interactions where folks are setting intentions. They're creating a vision for what's going to happen on the other side of the conference. They're actually meeting other attendees through this pre-experience. We have led these pre-experiences and have people tell us right then and there, I didn't even want to come to the big conference, but because of how this pre-event happened, I can't get there fast enough. So in our world, there's so many little examples where the preparation and how it gets people ready for what is hopefully transformative, it means so much.
And there are academics that often call that preparation preflection.
Well, that's a word I haven't heard.
Right. I thought you might like it just based on how you're talking. It's a preflection.
Everybody get that? That's going to be on the written exam at the end of this thing here. And on the integration side, right? On the integration side, this is where, as a change agent, and I love that you pointed out, you call yourselves whatever you want, right? But as someone who wants to create a lasting change, it's so important that we understand the limits of an experience. And that if somebody really wants lasting change, why don't we just everybody, be honest about it? That to do that, we got to keep coming back together. We got to keep having certain types of experiences. That's actually good for everybody involved. Clients stay longer. You're making more money. Those of you who know, like, you don't actually have to teach more content. You don't have to introduce new things. The integration is often just what we call learning loops. What's worked? What didn't? What can you learn? What are you going to do next?
Right.
That in and of itself continually will be the integration from that initial workshop. Anything else you want to say on the encapsulation model?
No, I mean, like I said, I knew you guys here in this audience would be doing this already, right? Because you're great at the coaching business. I know some of the work that you've done. And so it's just maybe the words and the way to think about it. The diagram helps you think about it more richly, about really how important that preparation and reflection are, and that you really don't want to forget about the integration part. I mean, there are some clients that don't want to buy the integration, right? That don't want to do that, and that's all you can do.
Yeah.
But that integration is incredibly important. In my case, so I think I've even heard the term for you, where there's the term, the sage from the stage, right? And before this book, that was often what I did, and I love to do, just get up there and speak. And I always tell people how much time is. I say I'll take as much time as you want. Right? I can do this for 5 days, right? And talk about this stuff for 5 days if you want, and have workshops in that. And I always resisted like giving up time to doing reflection, because I always thought, well, what you could learn from me, in 5 minutes is got to be possibly better than we could talk to among yourselves, right? I mean, seriously, I didn't articulate it that way, but that was in my head. And I write this and I said, okay, I got to exemplify what I'm talking about. And I've done that even as short as like 45-minute presentations. Is if I can't prepare them beforehand, then the first thing I do is have them talk to each other about the subject, get them prepared, and I spend that 5 minutes at the end to get them to reflect on it. It is better than getting 5 more minutes of content from me. And when I'm doing a speech, I can't do the integration. And I'm talking about the encapsulation. I mentioned, okay, that I'm exemplifying this here. I can't do the integration. So I did create, because I'm not working with you on, I do have clients that I work with, for on the longer term. But I created a page on our website of strategichorizons.com/integration, so that I could help people do that, with, here's how I can help you going on, including as little as a 1-hour session, that we can talk about anything that you want, follow up a speech or follow up your reading the book. Then there's a transformation toolkit, which again, I designed with Kevin Dully, where you talked about, John, about the nuance of words and how you want to spend on things. I wrote another 18,000 words on it, on how to do it. What are the important things? And it's things I learned in that writing. And this was like, I just crammed this all into December so we get it out by February. And like, for example, in the reflection, one of the things I realized, it's not in the book, but the best way to do reflection is sort of a past, present, future. So in the past is, what were the highlights of the experience? The present, how does it make me feel? What am I thinking about differently as a result of it? Is it having any effect on me? Future, what might you do with this? How might you change in the future? Does this give you an aspiration? So just little things like that come out with all these worksheets and tools to be able to do it. And so that's the best way to integrate from a speech that I give, or from just reading the book, right? If you want to go more, you want to go deeper, you want to have worksheets to work with your clients, then that's the place to go to get that. It's at least the best that I can do as a, sort of a one-person band on the transformation economy.
Well, so there's two things that I'm appreciate here, and just so everybody knows, if any of you want to follow up, connect with, learn from Joe, it's in the workbook, page 5, and you all have this. You can either scan a code or there's links to go check out the book, to check out that. In fact, the page you just mentioned, strategichorizons.com integration. I encourage you all to check it out, and not only for the benefit of everybody here, but also for them to see how you're actually doing what you're teaching.
Right.
I want to appreciate something you said, which is for some clients, they might say, "Oh, we don't need help with the integration," right. Which that's that's for them to say, right? Whether they need it or not. I'll always remember when I got called in to facilitate a design sprint. It was a 2-day summit at Facebook. And in the preparation phase, one of the questions I ask is I say, hey, we're going to design some solutions. Like, that's what we're talking to you about doing. It starts Tuesday at 8 a.m. and we're done Wednesday at 6 p.m. and I fly away and I'm done.
Right.
How prepared do you feel in your ability to take the possibility that your team might design some new solutions for your platform and execute them? And they cut me off and they said, well, that's the least of our issues. They're like, we can execute. The problem we have is getting these 80 people to actually align. And I'm like,
right.
Perfect. I did my part. Things they designed landed on the platform in months, even weeks.
Right.
But what I've learned is how important it is to clarify with the client, where is what I'm talking about end? And what is needed next? And do you feel equipped? What's your history? What's your capacity to execute on that? And if you need help, and if I don't want to provide that help, can I point them to someone who can?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's actually what I do with the book too, is I point people like, here's not to specific case, but there's a lot of people that can help you with all of this. But I love that you're asking that question. I assume, John, you asked that question when you're still designing and haven't come to an agreement about amounts of money and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. As early as possible. Yeah.
Right. And now I want to do that. Right. I want to do that. I haven't done that before. I have clients where I've done it, more or less. I've had 2 clients recently that I've done that, and I put money in the agreement specifically to do things afterwards that help them with what we talked about. And neither of those 2 have said, okay, let's do something. And even though I've talked with them, but I've got others where I've got one big retail client in Europe where I'm doing 2 virtual sessions beforehand for all the people that are going to be there. Then I do a speech to all the top management, then a workshop the next day with them on it's sort of half experiences, half transformations. It's 70% customers, 30% employees. I do a lot of work on employee experience and transformations as well. And then that's in September, in the beginning of the year, then we're going to do monthly events. I think probably because it's in a different budget, but monthly events to be able to go through and integrate that and learn on an individual basis.
Yeah. Well, in companies, they think of budgeting not too differently from how every person here as an individual thinks about their monthly outflow of cash, right? Like, how many of us, when we purchase a home or an automobile, where the primary fixation is monthly flow, right? What am I paying a month? Companies they might say, well, look, we can only pay $7,500 for this workshop. And then what you find out is they're perfectly fine paying $7,500 every 90 days.
Right.
And they're actually happier to have continuity in who is moving them through that journey, as opposed to they got to go find someone else to solve that. It's helpful to know that for those that don't have as much experience selling transformation into companies. I want to ask you, Joe, about this model that is in the workbook. It's on page 4. If anybody doesn't have it, I'll put it up here. The Delta model. And there's tremendous nuance in the book around this. There's so much unpacking. I guess what I'd love to know is, when I put this model up, is there any distinction here that you want to draw attention to? I'll tell you, for me, I'm fascinated by this idea that I can create an experience that is transformative and lasting transformation, I ought to remember that that might be two different things.
Right. That's the key, right? That those are two different things. It's the key model I put on our challenge coin is that Delta model as well, because it does incorporate so much learning. So I talked earlier about turning memorable experiences into transformative experiences. In fact, there's two levels. Every economic offering has gradations, right? So everyone does. But I discovered in the reading, I always knew about meaningful experiences. Actually, Albert Boschweik is joined here, I saw recently. And he's one of the people that got me really understand the importance of meaningful experiences. Memorable experiences engage who we are, right? They create that memory. Meaningful experiences connect with who we are, with our identity, which is key in some way, which is why I always thought meaningful experiences sort of a half step to transformation, because you're connecting with them on an identity basis. Transporting experiences, though, I discovered in writing the book, are ones that take us out of ourselves, that gives us awe, for example, or that get us into flow, or provide some transcendent euphoric experience. Those often are, when you have a single life-changing experience, it's often because it was transporting first. Something else I never said in the book, but not necessarily transforming. But as you take those, then you can turn them into those transformative experiences when you change who you are, right? As an individual, as a business, as a community, right? So then this changes who they are, that you have that actual change that they undergo. And generally, again, it's through a series of experiences, but it can be that one life-changing one. But exactly as you said, the key is so those are two different segments. There's three segments in here. The bottom one is purely experience. The top one is transformation. But the transformative experience is not a transformation offering make, to be able to use that old phraseology. That's where, because it ends at the end of the experience, because it doesn't have the integration. It doesn't have the follow through that's needed to make it a true transformation. It may not have had a preparation or anything. It may not have even been intended to be transformative. I have an opportunity this fall. I'm working with the American Alliance of Museums. And I did 2 speeches for them many years ago. And at one, I remember there were about 400 people there, mostly curators, some general managers of museums. And I asked a simple question. I said, of all the people here, how many are here today? Meaning, how many of you are in the museum business because of some experience that happened in a museum as a kid? And it was about 40% of the people raised their hands. They had a life-changing experience as a kid. And that often happens with experiences, themed experiences. I worked with, Meow Wolf and some of those designers, and talked about there are people that will grow up to be artists because you created this experience. They will be transformed. They're adults that will transform and recognize what they can do. And any immersive experience that you're going to tend to have that sort of thing. It's not intentionally, it is transformative, but they are then left to their own devices of whether they maintain that aspiration as a kid and truly become it. Many fall off. And with any experience today, they may maintain that, or they may not, right? You got to have that integration to do it. I often mention Burning Man, right? Which is as transporting experience as you go, where they actually make you sign, or they recommend to you, I think in their waiver, that you don't make any major decisions for 2 weeks. Right? Why? Because they've been transformed. They're sometimes psychedelically, but they've gone through this experience that fundamentally changed them. To a person, every burner says, I've been transformed. They add that element of identity they had been for. Now I am a burner. I wasn't a burner. Now I am a burner. But why? Because what happens over that 2 weeks is it tends to dissipate.
Yeah.
Right. They say after 2 weeks, right, you've gotten all the airy-fairy stuff out, and maybe now you can make a major decision. But why is it dissipate? Because they never did any integration. They didn't integrate that in. They don't go further than that. So that's what companies need to do. Then the top segment is all about is to recognize that there is a difference from metamorphic transformations, right? There are 4 types of aspirations, 4 types of transformations. The ones I mentioned about enriching, expanding, and enhancing, right? Those are all identity changes, but not that affect core identity, that have that metamorphosis, that where that chrysalis image on the cover of the book really identifies. And so that you see that the metamorphic, I should, for people who don't know, I imagine 95% of the people do, but a delta is a universal symbol for change, right? Which is one of the things I love about this model, right? And where you have a heavier right side, but it's a delta from a triangle. So the top segment is its own delta, and the core identity, I put even the delta within that delta to just emphasize the fact of this is real core change. This is metamorphic. This is change that you cannot go back to, where your values, your worldview, your mindset, your beliefs, there's at least one fundamental change that makes it so you can never go back. And so it's to recognize how much higher level that is, how much a greater moral responsibility you have if you're helping somebody undergo that. And so to really set it apart and say, hey, you really got to pay attention if you're doing this.
So Joe, I'm appreciating these examples, and it's bringing to mind for me, I was with our family a few weeks ago in Florida for spring break. And on the last day, we needed to figure out how to kill half a day. We had a late flight. And somehow we came up with the idea we're going to go to the Kennedy Space Center, which was well timed because the whole Artemis launch just happened. Right. And so we go to by the way, talk about charging for transformation. My youngest son, Kai, was standing at the kiosk thing when I paid and the number came up. He started laughing at me. He goes, "You're going to spend that for 4 hours or whatever." But that's not the point of the story. Point of the story is the way the entire experience was staged was phenomenal.
I know the designers of that experience.
It's phenomenal. And then, so I'm feeling better about $450, like an hour in, because we got 5 kids. So we leave the house, we start bleeding money. So I'm feeling better. And Adair, my partner, and I, we did this like naturally. When we got into the car, we facilitated the reflection.
Right.
And with kids, it's not complicated. It's what was that like? And what's it make you think about? But then when we got to who do you want to be, all of a sudden, like the way they're even thinking about that is totally different. And, if that experience wanted to stay with us, it could be fascinating for them to actually offer, here's how you keep bringing the conversation back at the dinner table, which we actually did naturally. But
again, right,
it was a great example.
Right? You do these things naturally, right? And if not, then be intentional about it. And I will guarantee you, right, I could place a bet on this, that every one of the people in the astronaut program today were at the Kennedy Center at some point in their lives before they became an astronaut.
They talk about that. Yeah.
It may have instigated the experience, but then if not, it cemented that experience.
Yeah.
And they went there.
And I want to appreciate one thing about reflection, and then I'm going to ask you about charging before we run out of time. So I coach youth baseball, and
where do you get the time for all of this, John?
I coach baseball, and one of the things that I'll ask our boys is I'll ask them after a game, I'll ask them if there's something they want to celebrate or something they want to learn. And the other thing I'll do is I'll ask them after a few weeks or a month, I'll ask them the question, how have you changed as an athlete or as a baseball player? And one of the things that I believe in, that I just want to be an advocate for, is that when it comes to human change, whether it's in the workplace or on a baseball field, it's not until I ask the question and then give them the space, and then they say their answer, that the change is actually complete. Right. And some would say, yeah, that's like basic experiential learning theory. But I just want to appreciate within your framework are some things that it can be so simple, it could be easy to pass by, but just having that space to reflect, giving space for people to actually talk it out loud, like you said, that is a demarcation point in something actually internalizing.
And then if they do say that there's something they wanted to learn, right, then the next practice, you need to bring that up. This is the integration. You bring it up, you said you wanted to learn this. Let's practice that, right? Are you still thinking about that? It depends on what it is and how you go about it. But that gives you a level of integration that you can do.
100%. Okay, I said we would finish with this. I want to ask about charging for transformation.
Right.
And I'll give a little bit of just using ourselves as an example in case you want to comment or disagree if this is a good example. We were inspired many years ago. I have a mentor by the name of Lynn Twist who wrote this book called The Soul of Money. And so this doesn't sound like it's coming from a marketing angle, but I learned from Lynn this idea that as an entrepreneur, I actually don't want to keep a penny from anybody if they don't think I did my part. It's just an energetic thing. So that has translated into, we have these certifications. Our core certification, we have this 100% zero risk promise. If people go through it and they don't think we did our part, they can ask for their money back. Every couple months, I go to our team and I say, because this comes up, like, what's our status? And as of last week, out of like 450 people in the last 2 years who've gone through a few of our certifications, I'm told one person has asked for a refund. Now, I'm both really proud of that, but I'm also just pointing to there's a deeper dimension, which is I love what you say in the book about taking on risk as a change agent. And the reason I love taking on that risk is because of how it forces me and our team to do our best work. And I think a lot of people oversee that opportunity. What do you want to say about that example or what I illuminated or anything about the idea of sharing in the risk and actually charging for outcomes or transformation?
Yeah, so it's a great way to do it. What you did offer, I've got like 3 different ways of charging for outcomes that I've seen companies do. There might be 4, but it's not a 2x2 if there are 4. But the easiest way, the most frequent, is a transformation guarantee of some sort. May not be 100% as you've done. Some are, and maybe frequently it's 25% seems to be like the general number. Sometimes 50%, and sometimes 100% of it. And one of the things it does, well, there's a paradox here with a transformation guarantee, is that you cannot ever guarantee the customer is going to change no matter how much you do your part.
Yeah.
And yet the best way to ensure that change is going to happen is to guarantee it in that sense.
That is
because
fascinating.
it frees up them to recognize that you are in it for them, that you will do what it takes to do it. You'll do what you said you will do, because if not, your income goes down. And it also is, and I'm curious about the one person who said no. Okay, well, who did follow up on that and figure out why it happened, right? Because it's a catalytic mechanism. Whenever somebody invokes that guarantee, then it means that you didn't do everything it took. Is there something else? Sometimes it's totally on their fault. They're not their fault, but so on their end, right? Sometimes life happens, and it's just like they're just not going to happen because of other things going on in their lives. But if there are things that you didn't do right, and maybe there's things also you can make up. You can say, okay, you didn't get the value. What didn't we do? All right, now we'll do it for even if it costs you twice as much money as you're going to get in income. It's worth it to do because your reputation, because your energy that you talked about, because you're doing what's right. Again, you're doing that fiduciary responsibility of I have a responsibility to make sure you're transformed. If there's anything else I can do, I will do it for you, right? Even if it didn't work the first time. So that's the way to think about that, is that dual purpose, that catalytic mechanism in particular. And also, by the way, charge success fees, that you give me more based on how successful you are. Sometimes, usually qualitative, but sometimes that can be quantitative. That will just measure what it is.
I love the point that you just made, that when we are willing to get behind what we're offering, the message that sends to others that we are in it with them. And I think that underlying message, I think especially today, when for a variety of reasons, consumers of different types of learning products have been burnt and are burnt out. I don't know how to do business without taking on more risk as the change agent. Even if we have a great reputation, even if there's good word of mouth, we got to do whatever we can to establish trust even before they buy. And I think it's one way to do it, is to really get behind what we're offering.
Right.
I love
Exactly.
that.
It establishes that trust.
Yeah, I love that. I want to honor, Joe, that we've had you in the chair for 2 hours now because you and I were on earlier. And I'll say thank you one more time.